A Friday night, a baseball game, a date full of laughter and cheap beers, a woman texting her friends, "I'm on a date, wish me luck." A few hours later, she would be gone. No calls, no texts, no answering the door when her daughters came home. And then a disturbing discovery, a glimpse of something that no one should ever have to see, something that haunted an entire city, not just because of its brutality, but because of how easily it could happen to anyone. A single mother, a trusted nurse, someone who had just wanted to believe in love again. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 50 of the Darklivity podcast. I'm your host, Kimbyrleigha, and I am here with my co-host, my perpetual snack supplier extraordinaire. He got me not one, but two Twizzlers.
It's your favorite.
And a Red Bull. Jonathan.
Hi. Darklivity is the dark downward slope into the degradation of the human mind and the consequences that such darkness brings to light.
We want wizards. We want wizards.
Wizards?
If you know, you know. It's from a movie. But clearly, he doesn't know how tight my wedding dress is going to be because I really needed to.
I thought I was being nice.
He is. He always gets
damned
his snacks.
If you do, damned if you don't.
Right? And now everyone just left who doesn't know us. But wow, we are on episode 50. Can you believe it?
I cannot.
Halfway to 100 episodes. And we're so thankful for all of you tuning in every week. Sorry if we miss a week here and there, but we're trying our best. But we never want to rush anyone's story. And let's get right into it, shall we? So if you grew up in the pre-internet dark ages, so to speak, the first voice that you would hear every morning on your way to work or to school or in the evening on your way back home, it wasn't a YouTuber or a podcaster. It was a disc jockey, a DJ, serving up your favorite music out of your beat-up car stereo.
Sliding into your life like a long-distance friend.
Who somehow knew exactly which heartfelt anthem that you needed in that moment. And if you know, you know, like I always say. And mine was Delilah.
Is that really what she did with Delilah in the mornings?
Hers was way more professional. I mean, I'm not a professional singer, but
that sounded pretty good.
Yes. Big hair and big feelings. Listeners would call in with these emotional equivalents to a house fire. Something like, my boyfriend dumped me during prom photos. And Delilah would smother the flames with Celine Dion. No Google, no Spotify algorithm, no Shazam. You know, when you need to know a song now, you just Shazam it. Or do we still use that? I do. Just one stranger's voice and a leap of faith that she understood your story and would give you something perfect to listen to. And then she would sprinkle in an emotional story of her own here and there. But dating was another leap of faith, an even clunkier experience, because picture this. You flip to the classifieds in the newspaper. Yes, the newspaper, the one that was thrown on your doorstep. And if it didn't quite make it there, maybe your lawn. And you would squint at cryptic abbreviations in the casual connections or the classified section. And it would read, SWF seeking SM for LTR. Enjoys hiking, NPR, no drama. Swipe right was called a P.O. box. Yes, you would actually send them a letter, sight unseen, and hope for the best.
Or if you were feeling hot and bothered, you'd call one of those spicy lines. You know, the ones like 1-900-587-5656?
No, because I didn't call those numbers. And for anyone that's not aware, those were adult conversations.
Well, as a young boy, my friend and I discovered the Spice Network on Squiggle Vision, and we could just see enough to find the numbers. And if you were my parents and you found out we racked up $1,000 food bill, I could only imagine the type of people behind the phone line who are answering thinking, you know, they were the ones on TV.
My friend's mom ran one of those out of her house, and she was like a hoarder. So when you walked in, there was just like one chair with a telephone, and that was who was actually calling. And she'd be like clipping her toenails while she's talking to you.
And on the other end, you'd have us, these cackling children, playing Ding Dong Ditch for $4.99 a minute.
Okay, but let's get serious, because there was also other numbers. You remember these, where you could record a 30-second voicemail, something like, "Hi, my name is Kimbyr. I'm 25. I'm really not. And I live in Los Angeles, and I love dogs and tacos." And then you wait to see who would roll the dice on your voice. just your voice. That's it.
There are even phone-in chat rooms, if you will, little love connections by dialing in and being connected with another random caller. Kind of like chat roulette, and they could be anyone, any age, anything.
It was a crazy time. And in 1993, the biggest love connection almost every woman was talking about back then was a grieving man who lost his wife and just moved to Seattle with his 8-year-old son, Jonah, to try to start over. America was collectively rolling the dice on this widower, and his name was Sam Baldwin.
So Jonah calls into this radio station on Christmas Eve, and he tells the host that his mom passed away, and his dad's completely heartbroken. And honestly, all he wants for Christmas is his dad to find love again. He says, "I think my dad needs a new wife."
Oh, yeah. And can you imagine you're sitting in traffic in the after work commute or from Christmas shopping if you were lucky enough to get off that day and your jaw dropping? Was this even real? Was it a setup? Was it clever marketing by a radio station? Either way, millions of women stuck in traffic, scrubbing dishes at home, or working late that night were suddenly leaning closer to the radio. And one of them was a journalist named Annie Reed. And little Jonah convinced, or I should say, tricked his dad into getting on the phone live on the air, and he had no idea. But after the host, who happened to be a doctor, a psychologist, I believe, made him comfortable enough to start opening up, women were all ears, including Annie. And hearing Sam talk about his loss, Annie felt really connected to him. Many women did, as he talked about how in love he was with his late wife, Maggie, and how they met and whether he could ever love someone again.
So after that, women from all over the country start trying to find the Sam guy just from hearing his voice. Like they hadn't even seen him. And even though Annie was already engaged, she felt such a strong connection to Sam that she literally couldn't stop thinking about him. A couple months go by and he's still stuck in her head. So she finally works up the courage to write him a letter, inviting a man she's never even talked to meet her on top of the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day.
And that sounds really romantic, but she decides not to send it. However, her friend sends it anyway, and we'll spare you all of the in-between details, but they end up falling in love when they finally meet. And if you didn't know by now, this is all from the romantic comedy Sleepless in Seattle. Sam is Tom Hanks. Annie is played by Meg Ryan, and Sleepless in Seattle becomes the blueprint for girls dreaming of big romantic dreams. But I think even before that movie came out, there were many hopeless romantics out there thinking that a love like this existed. They just had to find it. And if they hadn't yet, they had to keep looking. So fast forward 2 decades later, online dating has replaced personal ads, but the fantasy and the hope that a perfect stranger is out there and just gets me, that still exists. Maybe more now than ever before. Now people are at our fingertips. We can swipe, match, and find our happily ever after.
Actually, I'd imagine most people logging onto dating sites nowadays probably hope that they'll find that one connection that will lead to true love. And if it doesn't, well, they're just one swipe closer to finding the one.
And that is exactly where Ingrid Lyne steps in. She's petite with a big personality and an RN badge swinging from her scrubs. She's a single mom in the suburban Renton, Washington area, juggling 3 daughters, Reese, Brooke, and Noelle, who are 12, 10, and 7 years old. And that's a lot to handle in addition to her nursing schedule, especially since Ingrid's 2014 divorce from her ex-husband, Philip Lyne. She has poured every ounce of herself into those girls. But even superhero moms want someone to ask how their day went. So after months of pep talks from friends and coworkers, she finally decided that she was going to create a profile on the dating site Plenty of Fish. And she was hoping for the best. Except she wouldn't find her dream date. Instead, unfortunately, she would be found dead just a month after her first date.
All right, so it's Saturday, April 9th, around 10 a.m. in Renton, Washington. Phil Lyne pulls up outside the house he used to share with his ex-wife, Ingrid. His daughters are in the car with him, and the car is packed with their backpacks and stuff from spending the last few days with him. The co-parenting handoff is a ritual choreographed down to the minute. Ingrid's silver 2015 Toyota Highlander SUV is always parked in the driveway, but today it's not. That was the first thing that seemed unusual. Phil walks up to the house and knocks on the door. He waits, but there's no answer. He tries the doorknob and it's locked, so he knocks again. Nothing. So he thinks maybe she went for a quick errand and was running late. But the thing is, Ingrid is never late when it's her turn with her girls.
Phil pulls out his cell phone and he calls her, but there's no answer. Phil's at a loss about what to do next. It's his turn to make sure the kids get dropped off, so he decides to call Ingrid's mother, Georgia Bass, who lives in town not far away. And unlike Ingrid, Georgia answers Phil's call and he tells her what's happening, that he's standing outside of Ingrid's door and she's not answering her phone and her car isn't there. So Phil asks if Georgia has any idea where her daughter is, and she doesn't. And now she's worried because this is unlike Ingrid. Georgia immediately jumps in her car and drives over to Ingrid's house to try to help figure out what was going on. And of course, make sure that Phil exchanges the girls per their custody agreement. So she knocks, just like Phil did, and she gets no answer. But she has an extra key to her daughter's house, so she lets herself inside. She looks around, she calls out Ingrid's name over and over again as she walks through this house, and she's wondering what could have happened. Could Ingrid have fallen in the shower? Could she have passed out or overslept? But then where was her vehicle? What's going on? And are there any clues in the house?
Nothing about the scene screams foul play. There's no broken stuff, no furniture flipped over. The house isn't trashed or anything. It looks exactly like how Ingrid would have left it. But there was something weird. Her purse, her phone, and her tablet were still there. Those are the things she always took with her to work and just in general every day. So why would she leave them behind? It didn't make any sense. And there was no note either. Ingrid wouldn't have just left without telling someone, especially not without her kids. By 10:42 a.m., Georgia is calling Renton Police Department to report her 40-year-old daughter missing.
911, what are you reporting?
The missing person out of our city. So Lyne is her last name. First name Ingrid. She and her vehicle are missing.
And what kind of car?
A silver 2015 Toyota Highlander.
And do we have any ideas of where she might be going, or?
No, her ex-husband was dropping the kids off,
Mm-hmm.
and she wasn't there.
Okay.
This has never happened.
And we hear it in almost every true crime story. When an adult vanishes, they have every right to disappear, if they want to. And Georgia truly doesn't believe her adult child chose to leave.
And mothers just know. We've heard that before in stories like this as well. They can feel when something isn't right. And Renton police listen as Georgia explained everything we just told you. Ingrid is a responsible nurse, a mother of 3, and now she's just gone. They ask her if there's anything she may know about where Ingrid was last, and she said she would need to check with Ingrid's sisters and friends because she's a little out of the loop on her adult daughter's personal life recently. In the meanwhile, Officer Elliott from Renton PD meets Georgia at Ingrid's house to take a full statement and gather additional information. Missing persons calls for healthy adults rarely get immediate attention, but there was something about the fact that she wasn't answering her phone and her SUV wasn't there, and she had 3 kids that were waiting at her front door. It just screamed urgency.
Inside the house, Elliot runs a standard checklist with Georgia Bass, the usual questions. What was Ingrid's lifestyle like? Was she single? Was she dating anyone? Would anyone want to harm her? Does she drink? Does she do substances? Does she have any mental health issues? Those type of questions. She explained that Ingrid is divorced and her ex-husband Phil was the one that noticed she was missing. Sure, it was 2 years ago, but this was still relevant. We all know detectives work from the inside out. Those closest to the missing person are looked at first. Elliot speaks with Phil in depth. He answers all his questions, and he has no reason to want Ingrid to disappear and has no idea where she could be. They are quickly able to confirm Phil's alibi, and he is clear of suspicion for the time being. What no one knew yet was that somewhere in the Seattle sprawl, Ingrid Lyne was already headline material. Someone knew exactly where she was and what happened to her. Officer Elliott was still trying to piece clues together, and that's when Ingrid's mom remembered that her Verizon wireless phone account is shared by Ingrid, so she had the ability to log into their account and check her call log.
With Officer Elliott right there, Georgia starts looking through Ingrid's calls to try to see who she corresponded with last. The most recent contact is from a phone number with a Montana area code 406. And it's not just one call. There are text threads and multiple phone calls back and forth, little digital breadcrumbs stretching back at least 3 weeks. Georgia didn't recognize this number, but it must have been someone Ingrid spoke to often, and it was the last number she called. So Elliot jots down the number and plans to trace it to its owner. But Ingrid's sister is faster. She's already Googling it, and she's doing a reverse phone number lookup. And I'm telling you, these armchair detectives, they are faster than the real detectives sometimes. The cyber sleuths, they're on it right away. And the number comes up connected to a Facebook profile of a guy that looks to be about Ingrid's age. so they feel like they're onto something.
His name is John Charlton, but just to be sure this wasn't some old number tied to a previous owner, they ran it through Accurate. It's a company that checks public records, and it confirmed the number actually belonged to a 37-year-old Seattle guy named John Robert Charlton. Now they take a closer look at his Facebook profile. His main photo is him wearing what looks like Mardi Gras beads around his neck and star-shaped sunglasses, smiling at the camera.
It seems right away, okay, this guy likes to party. He's got a sense of humor. He seems happy. He's average looking, active, lives close by per his profile information. But no one close to Ingrid knows who this John guy is. But at this point, all they want to know is if this guy knew anything about where Ingrid was last or what she did the night before. She's been in contact with him, so he must know something.
The Marines have a phrase, first report, best report. For detectives, that translates to the people who you talk to in the first 24 hours will decide whether your case cracks open or turns cold. So you want to talk to as many people as possible.
Georgia does what any mom with a cell phone would do. She texts this guy John right away. I mean, she has his number, so why not? It's the most logical thing to do. What does she have to lose? She says, "Hi, this is Ingrid's mother. We can't reach her, and I saw yours was the last number she texted. Do you know where she is?"
And John responds right away. He texted, "My name is John. I thought she was with her kids today."
Georgia quickly texts back and she said, "When did you see her last? She's not here. Her phone, driver's license, and purse are, but she isn't. Please respond. I've called 911. Now, I'm sure with every text bubble that was popping up, Georgia is just clinging to that phone. She's just watching and waiting for more information. And then John says something else.
He says, 911? What's going on? We went to a Mariners game last night, but didn't stay the night together because she has her kids today. Not sure what she has told you about me and our relationship." And that's enough for Officer Elliott. He asked Georgia to request a call.
So Georgia texts again and she said she's missing. "What time did you see her last? A police officer needs to speak with you, as you may be the last person who saw her. Please call this number." She obviously gives him Elliott's phone number. And this time, there's no quick response. Instead, John just goes silent. I would have called him at that point. I don't know if they did, but this is what I gathered from the reports, that they're just texting back and forth. I don't think I would be waiting around for him to call me or to call this officer, but they probably think that's what he's going to do, that he's silent because he's making phone calls. It was probably a lot for this man to think about, especially if he just met Ingrid and her family's now saying she's missing and telling him that he's the last one that might have seen her.
And that they are calling 911.
Yeah, especially that part. So Georgia sends out a final plea in a very anxious paragraph. She texts him back saying, "Please, John, did Ingrid say anything about someone coming to see her after you separated from her last night? We can't find her car, and any help would be appreciated. We are desperate. She would never just go off and leave her family." But Georgia's just left unread, and all Ingrid's friends are concerned. They're taking to social media, they're posting about Ingrid, they're tagging her, they're saying, "Please share this post. My friend is missing. She's been missing since Friday night. Her car, a gray Toyota Highlander with Washington plates," and they even post the license plate number, and said, "We have to bring her home. She's got 3 kids that need her." And this is very concerning. She had a lot of people close to her that cared a lot about her and couldn't understand how she could just vanish. Meanwhile, detectives canvass Ingrid's cul-de-sac, and one of her neighbors, Kathy, confirms what Georgia already knows, that Ingrid spent Friday night at the Mariners home opener with a new guy that she was seeing named John.
Now, with a confirmed last seen lead, Ingrid's missing Toyota Highlander, her phone that's gone dark and stopped pinging towers, the police flag John Charlton. Average-looking Facebook profile with some cheesy Mardi Gras beads in his profile pic as their person of interest number 1. But what Renton police don't know yet is that Seattle PD, with a much bigger and more prominent agency, has already fielded a 911 call with a big lead. This was so disturbing, it's the kind of thing you don't forget, even long after retiring your badge. The call came in the same day, but at 4:19 p.m. on Saturday, April 9th. The caller was Mike Novasio, a resident who had just returned home from a trip out of state. It was a typical return from vacation routine. Garbage pickup had come and gone Thursday while he was away, so there were recycling and garbage bins still sitting on the curb. When Mike went to haul them back towards the house, he noticed something strange. The blue recycling one felt unusually heavy, as if someone had filled it after the truck passed. He knew it wasn't like that when he left. Recycling is usually pretty light, plastics, maybe some cans, but this felt like 100 pounds. It was really odd.
And he was really curious, maybe even a little annoyed, because we know sometimes people throw trash in other people's bins. So he hurled the lid open, and inside there were several white plastic garbage bags. Not ones that he actually recognized, and definitely not the usual junk mail and the empty water bottles that he threw inside. So he reaches in, and the first bag feels really dense. He tried to pull it out of the bin, but the shape was really awkward and bulky, so he dragged the bin onto his lawn and he actually tipped it over. What he saw next made him stumble backward, and that is when he called 911. So let's jump right to that call, some of it that we're going to play for you now.
911, what are you reporting?
This is going to sound really bizarre, but I went to go grab my recycling bin, and there were 3 white trash bags in the recycling bin, and I went to lift them out. And honestly, it's freaking me out, but it looks like it's a foot.
Now, it's not every day that a call like that comes in, and that is terrifying. Now, in case you couldn't make out what he was saying, let's just recap a bit.
He told 911 he thought there was a human foot inside one of the bags. He said they looked professionally wrapped.
I kind of didn't understand that part because we don't have a visual. So I couldn't picture a professionally wrapped garbage bag. But then he says that he thinks he saw a face in the bag and would look like blood on the outside. And I would be horrified. I don't think I could even speak in that moment.
As he's standing there looking at the bag with blood on it, the sun hits it just right. And through the sheer material, he can actually make out painted toenails.
And don't say a mannequin, because I'm sure that's what some of you may have thought. And that's what some people do think. Maybe it's just a mannequin that someone threw away, but it's never a mannequin. This poor man was crying while he was explaining all this. It's just too terrifying to even think about, because if you're thinking about this man coming home, minding his own business, thinking, oh, a neighbor put some trash in my bin, and then finding this.
But when he really looked, he thought he could make out the shape of a leg, a definite shape of a thigh, and that's when he knew it was a body.
And once this man believed that this was a body, he had to also believe it belonged to someone that was no longer alive. Mike felt so sick to his stomach. His voice was cracking on the phone call, and you can hear him struggling between disbelief and total horror. His words came out in a mix of certainty and denial, because he's like, I think it's a leg. But then he's also like, what? What am I looking at?
I guess it's understandable, though, because the second you let yourself believe it's a human body, you also have to accept that this is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's loved one, and now they're lying in pieces in your recycling bin.
It's sad. It really is. But that's what he's seeing. I mean, it's a fact.
Seattle officers and homicide detectives swarm the scene within minutes. They secure the block, tape off the lawn, and call in the medical examiner to identify what's inside the bags. They already made a cut in a couple of them just to confirm this wasn't something like a mannequin or a doll, and all it took was just one look, and they confirmed it was a body.
Dr. Lubin from the Kings County Medical Examiner's Office arrived within minutes, and he began to examine and then catalog what was inside the bags. It was a body of a female. She was Caucasian, approximately 5'6", and partially disarticulated, which is a clinical word for cut apart. And one bag contained a human leg, the second bag contained an arm, and the third bag was the head of the deceased female. Dr. Lubin immediately noted something very significant. The remains were fresh. There was no bloating, no discoloration, no sign of the normal decomposition that sets in within days. So this wasn't a case where someone died weeks ago and was just discovered. This was new. This just happened. Whoever this woman was, she hadn't been dead very long.
But without a wallet, phone, or any personal effects in the bag, there was no immediate way to ID the woman lying in pieces on a stranger's lawn. But at least they had some clues. Distinctive facial features, her hair, her eye color were still visible, and even her approximate age, roughly in her late 30s to early 40s. From there, it became a race against time. Detectives called dispatch to cross-check any active missing persons reports filed that weekend, and it didn't take long. A report had just come in from Renton PD. It was Ingrid Lyne, a nurse, a mom of 3, reported missing less than 24 hours earlier. The timeline matched. Her mother reported her missing the morning of April 9th, and at that same day at 4:19 p.m., the body parts were turning up less than 10 miles away from Ingrid's home in Renton. Officers pulled up Ingrid Lyne's DMV photo, they compared it carefully to the head found in the recycling bin, and the resemblance was undeniable.
But even as officers quietly closed in on the identity confirmation, more questions piled up. If this was Ingrid Lyne, then where was the rest of her body and who had done this? And how the hell did no one see anything? Because they were going around to the residents in that area on that street, and people were coming and going all the time. Seattle PD launched a full neighborhood canvass. Officers moved up and down 21st Avenue, knocking on doors, asking residents if they noticed anything unusual. A car idling late at night, suspicious activity, anything. They also asked for permission to look inside every resident's garbage and recycling bins. They were desperate to find other discarded evidence. But at this point, no other remains were found. Just in that one blue recycling bin on Mike's property. But somewhere out there, someone knew exactly what happened to Ingrid Lyne and where they put her. All of her. They just had to find them.
By Sunday morning, April 10th, word about a gruesome discovery on 21st Avenue had already started creeping through the city. Neighbors were posting these vague updates on Facebook. One even uploaded a picture of police tape and people in hazmat suits. A few even did on-camera interviews with news stations. The speculation began immediately. But Kimbyr, do you know what's better than speculation?
Probably leads that actually are based with evidence.
That's right, concrete facts. And Officer Elliott was on a mission to find them. That morning, he was back at Ingrid's house, after Renton police secured judicial permission to conduct a search of her home. And on her home computer, he found something critical. Mariners tickets, 2 of them, purchased online for Friday night, April 8th, 2016. The game was at 7:10 p.m. The fact that Ingrid bought 2 tickets perfectly lined up with what John Charlton had claimed during those frantic text messages with her mother, Georgia. They had plans and they were together that night, and the police weren't about to take a maybe boyfriend's word for it.
Right, they had to double check everything. So they checked with Ingrid's friends and family, those close to her, and a former roommate that she still talked to almost every day confirmed it. Ingrid had texted her around 10:35 p.m. on Friday night saying that she was on a date. So now they have a timeline from about 7 p.m., let's say, to 10:35 p.m. They know that Ingrid was alive, or at least, her phone was texting and supposedly at the Mariners game with John, but everything needs to be checked before moving forward. So they go down to the stadium and they request the CCTV footage to scan through looking for any sign of Ingrid and John. They spot Ingrid. And she is with a guy. So they slow down the video and they go frame by frame. And they're looking at their programs. They're walking to their seats. They're walking together. They look normal. They look happy even. And Ingrid is showing the guy something, presumably John, the guy that, we saw in the Facebook profile. And the guy even points to the stairs, almost like he's like, don't trip, watch your step. So it appeared to be an ordinary date night. 2 people getting to know one another, enjoying a baseball game. When they checked the footage after the game, it appeared as though they followed the crowd out to the bars right near the stadium. That is really common for people to go out there to all the local bars around for after parties. But this is where the lead ends. So what happened next? What happened after 10:35 p.m.? Because that's when Ingrid texted her former roommate saying that she was out on a date. By then, the game would have been over, so she was probably out at the bars.
But since her purse and phone were found at her house, she must have come back home afterward. But did she drive alone, or did she drive back with John? Remember that John told Georgia that he didn't stay with her that night because she had her kids the next day. Police need to fill in the void in this timeline. Officer Elliott, along with several detectives, continued searching Ingrid's home, and things started to feel darker. In the kitchen pantry, detectives spotted a near-empty box of white garbage bags, the exact same type as the ones found with body parts on Michael Navasio's lawn. By this time, Seattle PD had been in contact with Renton PD, but Ingrid's body had still not been confirmed to be the ones in the bags. They were still trying to piece together anything they could, and inside the bathroom, tucked awkwardly between the toilet and the bathtub, they found something that definitely didn't belong there. A 15-inch pruning saw.
And not the kind that you hang neatly in the garage or you use to pretty up your backyard rose bushes. This thing was heavy duty. It's big. We'll show you one on the screen if you are watching. It's curved and heavy with razor sharp teeth built to tear through thick tree limbs very easily. Now, I didn't know what this thing was. And when you Google pruning saw, you would expect to see Home Depot ads, not something straight out of a horror movie. But this thing looked terrifying. And I guess it's worse because of what detectives believed it had been used for.
The blade wasn't clean. The pruning saw was streaked with what appeared to be dried blood and tissue. Detectives found what looked like small drops of blood near the bathtub, too, and there was enough to swab, catalog, and send to the crime lab. At this point, there were no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, no defensive wounds, and yet the horror of what had been done to Ingrid Lyne was about to be evidence in every square foot of that tiny bathroom.
Yeah, because if you were merely to take a quick look in there, it appeared to be clean and tidy, but it's what you can't see with the naked eye that told the story, and we'll get there. But first, let's go to the next morning on Monday, April 11th. By then, confirmation comes in from the King County Medical Examiner. The body parts recovered from the 21st Avenue recycling bin do belong to 40-year-old Ingrid Lyne. Identification was made via dental records and distinctive physical characteristics, including nail polish, that matched a recent photo Ingrid's mother provided. And that, to me, was so sad because it's something so personal being matched up like that. And of course, the family being notified was gut-wrenching. Everyone was still holding out hope, especially Ingrid's daughters, that she would be found alive and that wasn't her in the bin. And I'm sure you can imagine the heartbreak. This poor family, they were just in disbelief and heartbroken. On top of the fact that the news stations were already running with this story, so they're seeing it everywhere. You can't control that. And the headlines shifted from human remains found in a recycling bin to things like missing Renton nurse and mom of 3 confirmed dead, body dismembered. Her name, her photo, her smile, plastered across web pages instantly became a symbol of every online dater's worst nightmare.
Neighbors along 21st Avenue brought flowers to Mike Navasio's house, unsure of what else to do for the man who found her. One local resident said he looked haunted, like something in him had permanently changed. Another told the KIRO News that this isn't something you can unsee.
I'm sure. I mean, they're trying to kind of grieve for the man who was shaken about what was found on his property in his bin. I don't think you could ever use your bin anymore. You know, you would think of it every time you opened it. And on Reddit, the true crime groups were buzzing with speculation. They were asking a lot of questions, like what kind of person could do something like this? And also they wanted to know who the John guy was.
The Swedish medical center where Ingrid worked as a nurse released a public statement honoring her compassion, professionalism, and deep love for her daughters. Her coworkers held a candlelight vigil in front of the hospital entrance, many wearing Seahawks jerseys in her memory since that was her favorite team.
Her family also made a very heartfelt statement. And they told the public, quote, "This weekend, a light went out in our lives forever. Ingrid, beloved mother, daughter, sister, and friend, was taken from us for reasons we still cannot comprehend. Our hearts are broken and can never be fully mended. But out of our grief, hope still springs, as does our appreciation. Words cannot express our gratitude to our communities near and far for banding together and expressing their support and ultimately their love. For this, we will be forever grateful. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you all," end quote. Now, they also went on to express their appreciation to the Renton and the Seattle police departments because they were working tirelessly to uncover the truth about what exactly happened to Ingrid. They even mentioned that the police officers went over and fed Ingrid's cats. I mean, you know, this was personal for a lot of people. This wasn't just somebody found dead on a lawn in a garbage bin. This was a mother. And as the community recognized and personalized her and humanized her, even the police officers were affected by that. And her family also wanted to give an update on Ingrid's daughters. The family said that while they were devastated, they were amazingly resilient. And they couldn't be more proud of how they've handled the worst news they'll ever get in their young lives. And their father just went on to thank everyone in the community for all of their support in their darkest hour.
On the evening after Ingrid's body was officially identified, the community gathered to honor her. Friends, grieving but determined, organized a candlelight vigil at St. Matthew's Church. Photos of Ingrid smiling with her 3 daughters were placed at the front, framed by flickering candlelight. This wasn't just a church service, it was a defiant stand, a way of refusing to let violence be the final word on Ingrid Lyne's life. Afterward, the crowd gathered their umbrellas and stepped into the soft drizzle falling over Renton, and they made their way through the dark streets, rain soaking into jacket sleeves and poster boards, but they kept walking in Ingrid's memory. They walked to Calmus Avenue to Ingrid's home, and at her home was makeshift memorial bouquet of fresh flowers, handwritten notes, and stuffed animals left behind by neighbors and friends, each offering a small, heartbreaking prayer for the woman who was taken far too soon.
And one of Ingrid's friends, Jim Morales, spoke at the vigil and he said, "We are all hurting. We've got a big wound that we're dealing with and it's terrible. But the majority of us are going to get over this sooner than the family. She was a great mother. She was a great friend. She was a great person," Morales said. He talked about how she loved sports and had a biting, sharp, witty, funny sense of humor. And for women across Seattle and beyond, this wasn't just a tragedy. It was a terrifying reminder that something as simple as meeting someone for a drink can cost you your life. Even though they didn't know the details, all they were hearing was that she went on a date, went to some bars, and then later she was found dead.
Police told the media this was a particularly heinous and personal crime, and our investigation is far from over.
Well, yeah, they haven't found the rest of her remains. They haven't even connected a suspect, so I would say it would be far from over at this point. But there was also something frustrating happening. Even with the way that Ingrid's body had been discovered, cut apart, discarded, police still could not officially call it a homicide yet, because in death investigations, especially under Washington law, you have to determine the cause of death first. If a person overdoses, let's say, or suffers from a medical emergency, and then someone panics and tries to hide their body, technically that is not a murder. At least not on paper, not legally speaking. So without a gunshot wound, a stabbing, obvious pre-mortem or fatal wounds, something to prove intentional killing, officers were left guessing exactly what happened. Was Ingrid's death violent? Was it accidental? Was it intentional? They didn't know. The only way to find out was to wait for an autopsy result, but they needed to find the rest of Ingrid or get another lead.
And they hadn't found Ingrid's vehicle, but detectives were now working on that angle. A bolo beyond the lookout had been issued the day before, and now a local Seattle resident has called in to say that they have spotted the 2015 Toyota Highlander parked in a residential neighborhood in Belltown, less than 10 miles from where Ingrid's remains were found. It's backed into a parking spot at an apartment building. Detectives go out there, they take photos, and then they dust for fingerprints, paying attention to the driver's side door handle. They ended up finding 3 prints they could use and put in the CODIS, or compared to a suspect if they end up finding any.
They open the doors, they look inside, and they don't see any clear signs of a struggle. In the back seat were 2 children's booster seats, and it really made me sad to see those type of items, knowing that those little girls would be without their mother.
Yeah, it's just something so ordinary it could be in any one of our cars.
Exactly. And there was also some clothing on the seat and some coloring books and other toys in the back pockets of the front seats.
But when they looked closer, inside of the car, they found white garbage bags, like they were just tossed there or used on the road to store stuff in. But they matched the ones from Ingrid's home and the ones her remains were found in. So there's another connection.
I'm not exactly trying to be skeptical, but I have to say that white garbage bags are not really that uncommon. I think we all have them. But it was the fact they were found in these 3 places, and that was why there was a connection. Investigators believe that the car was at the least used to transport Ingrid's remains before they were placed in that recycling bin across the city.
As detectives spoke to more of Ingrid's close friends and coworkers, they were told that she was really excited about John. She told them he was someone she could relate to, someone she had fun with, and that there may be a future there, but she wasn't ready to jump in with both feet. She wasn't ready to introduce him to her kids, but she was starting to go out on more dates with him in public. Before that baseball game, she only hung out with him at her place.
Think more Netflix and chill. Are we still saying that? More casual, maybe even more physical, like a hookup, than a commitment. But they had only been dating for about a month. So of course, detectives want to speak with John, and there was a lot going on at once in this investigation. There were crime scene technicians doing a more intense search of the house as detectives were trying to track John down to bring him in for a formal interview. Even Ingrid's young daughters were questioned with a counselor present, but they probably wouldn't have known much or had much to offer since it seemed like Ingrid was keeping her dating life pretty private.
But speaking of a more intense search, after that pruning saw was found, technicians came in and confirmed that the swabs from the floor and the saw were human blood. And now they were examining the saw more closely, and they removed pieces of bone fragments, further confirming what I think most of you already know, that this was most likely used on Ingrid's body.
Yes. And the fact that the saw was found in the bathroom where there is a tub, which is a likely place to carry out such a horrific act, they begin to analyze the tub. They remove the cover to the drain, they pull apart the plumbing, and right away, they pull from the pipes what look like more human tissue, blood, and bone fragments. Renton PD brought out their next tool, luminol, and I'm sure you have seen it, something on CSI, maybe one of these videos we've done, but you know the drill. You spray it on surfaces, you turn down the lights, and if blood was ever present there, even if someone tried to wash it away, it glows a bright fluorescent blue. To the naked eye, Ingrid's bathroom looked eerily clean, but once detectives sprayed luminol across the bathtub and the bathroom floor, the room lit up right away. Blood had been everywhere. It was clear that someone had tried to wipe everything down, tried to erase what had happened inside that bathroom, but blood always leaves a trace, and luminol doesn't lie.
Armed with this new evidence, detectives circled back to the King County Medical Examiner, pushing for a clear autopsy ruling. Dr. Lubin, the pathologist handling Ingrid's case, reconsidered everything: the dismemberment, the cleanup, the blood presence, and the series of disturbing physical signs that was already noted on Ingrid's body. For one, while most of Ingrid's blood loss appeared to have happened after death, which made sense given the condition she was found in, but there were more marks on her neck that didn't fit with the cutting. There were finger marks, the kind of bruising caused by hands, kind of like manual strangulation. On top of that, Ingrid's eyes showed petechial hemorrhages, those tiny red dots caused when blood vessels burst from pressure, a classic, undeniable indicator of strangulation.
Right, she didn't OD, she didn't fall, this wasn't accidental, and then someone panicked and tried to cover it up. Someone squeezed the life out of her. That's what they are recognizing at this point. They also tested her toxicology panel to be sure, and no drugs were in her system, no medical emergencies masking the real cause of death. Her blood alcohol level came back to a 0.074, enough for a slight buzz, maybe some lowered inhibitions, but not legally intoxicated. And for context, most states define legal intoxication, for drivers at least, at a 0.08. Ingrid might have felt a little relaxed, a little more trusting, maybe a little less cautious, but she wasn't stumbling drunk. She wasn't out of control. She wasn't incapable of fighting back if she even had the chance.
With this new forensic clarity, Dr. Lubin officially ruled Ingrid Lyne's cause of death as homicidal violence by manual strangulation. No more lingering doubts, no more technicalities. This wasn't just a dismemberment after death, this was murder. And the last person known to be with her, the man she went to the baseball game with, was now sitting in an interview room at the Seattle Police Department. He was found at his last address that was on record from the DMV, a home in Lake Stevens about an hour and a half away from Ingrid's in Renton. It's 10 a.m. and John is introduced to detectives Donna Stanglin and Jeff Mudd. And now they get down to business.
John comes in and he's calm. He's pleasant and cooperative. He's dressed in jeans, a jacket, and a t-shirt. He's clean-cut looking. And if you didn't know the backstory, he could have easily been mistaken for a guy there to report a stolen bike, not someone that was being grilled over a woman's brutal murder. The detectives had already dug into John's Plenty of Fish dating profile, and he went by John Charles. His profile said non-smoker, average build, Capricorn, some college education, 5'9", 37 years old, self-described free thinker, looking for friendships, not serious dating. His main photo was him in a white t-shirt, leaning back in his chair, looking off camera with a side smile. He also had that star sunglasses picture and another one with a female. To me, these were the typical dating profile pictures. You want one that's fun. You want one with friends, maybe one with a girl to show that you can pull a woman. You probably know all about, the standard operating procedures for a dating profile. So John had these light green eyes, dark hair, and the all-American look to him. which I think would definitely be enticing, especially with the way he put his profile together.
For the About Me section, he wrote, "My intent here is to simply make friends and meet up for a good conversation. Not much of the crowded bar or club type. Mellow and quiet is more my scene."
And like I said, that would be appealing to many women. So sure, maybe he wasn't looking for anything serious, but Ingrid specifically had just gotten back into the dating scene. So it kind of takes the pressure off to think that you're just meeting for a good conversation and nice company.
For his first date, he wrote, "I'm not here for dating, only friendships. This us," I think he meant is,
Yeah, he totally made a typo.
not some scam to get laid either. However, if we did meet as friends, we could grab coffee, beer, comedy show, etc. Whatever people do as friends, basically.
What does that come off like to you? Because I'm going to tell you how it comes off to me as a woman.
I mean, I'm pretty sure most of us could tell a front when we read it, but some are often fooled. I mean, sure, there are outliers. Maybe dating sites are great places to meet friends.
I don't know. For me, looking at something like that, I don't think this profile would be very appealing, but possibly the way that he looked in his photos would be appealing to someone like Ingrid. I don't know. But I think the fact that he says like, oh, this isn't a scam to get laid. I mean, if anyone has to point that out,
Right.
it just seems like you're going above and beyond to make sure I don't think you're weird.
It's a front.
Yeah, like you said, it's probably a front. But who knows? You know, sometimes being friends first is a great idea. I mean, we were friends first, but it almost comes off like he already has a girlfriend. Like, I'm just looking for something to do when I'm bored. You know, like maybe when my girlfriend isn't around. And it almost seems like it's suited more for Bumble BFF or something like that. Because if you're just looking for friends, why are you on a dating site? He also said that he was seeking women, not anything complicated, and that his longest relationship was over 2 years. Now, what I wanted to know was whether this was a drop-down menu and what the other options were, because 2 years doesn't seem that long. At 37 years old, if his longest relationship was just over 2 years, that would be a red flag for me.
Yeah, that can mean anything. We don't know the options. It could be 5 years, depending on what each dropdown was.
Right. There could be another one that said over 5 years or over 10 years, and maybe 2 years plus sounded more in line with what his experience was. I don't know. He also said he was undecided if he wanted children, and we know Ingrid has 3. So I don't know how she would feel about that, but maybe she was done having children and she would feel more confident with someone who wasn't pressuring her to have more kids. By the way, just so y'all know, we are just giving our impressions of this profile. You can do the same. These are just things that maybe you're thinking about. Maybe we're thinking the same, maybe not.
He added that he was there for friends, and he didn't do drugs, and that he was very ambitious.
I think overemphasizing that he's just there for friends. I mean, he said that in like multiple parts of this profile. But he's on a dating site. But I think we all know one of the biggest problems with just looking at a dating site, especially one where you're picking from drop-down menus and you don't really have space to expand on who you are, people are only getting a snapshot of a person.
But that's also why a lot of people decide to meet up right away. That way, you can figure out whether you have chemistry with that person or not.
Usually people don't want to waste their time. Exactly. If they don't click in person, then they're going to look elsewhere. Because sometimes people don't even look like what they do in their pictures. Those pictures are like 20 years old. There's so many catfishes out there, even back in 2016 when this was happening. And we already know that Ingrid and John did meet up. Her friends and even her coworkers said that they were dating for at least a month. We saw the CCTV footage of them together. John was hanging out as a friend at some point with her, and it seems like he wanted more with Ingrid. But here we are speculating again. But police have him sitting in the police department. He's about to tell them exactly what was going on between him and Ingrid. But first, they wanted to understand the basics about John. I think the first, pink flag, you could call it, was that, and it's not that big of a deal, but he tells them that he's currently without a home. He says he's homeless. Those were his words. He does not have a place to live.
Right. He tells detectives he does not have an address, and I think that would strike anyone as just a bit odd. When they were looking at someone, they had clothes that don't look dirty. They appeared showered, and John doesn't exactly fit that typical mold of someone living on the streets, but he said he was.
And we're not being judgmental. We're observing things, and when you observe his appearance, like you said, he is clean. He doesn't look like he just slept out in the elements. So I think that was something the detectives wanted to dig a little more deeper on. He did say on his profile that he didn't have a car, And a lot of people decide not to have a car for numerous reasons. Maybe they live in an area that's really walkable and there's a lot of public transportation. Sometimes it's easier not to have a car. But now we know he doesn't have a car and he doesn't have a home. So it's getting a little more interesting. Like, what's John's story? My first inclination that maybe John wasn't dating for a relationship, but maybe resources, a place to stay, food, transportation. And we know Ingrid seemed to be the one that purchased the Mariners tickets. So let's be real here. There are a lot of women who they're not without homes, but they do go on dating sites and go on dates every single day of the week so that they can get a free dinner. I'm not trying to be mean. Guys can do this as well, but I'm just putting it out there that I have known this is a thing. And maybe it's fun that they can both have a good time or maybe split the bill and it's cheaper. But the point I'm trying to make is sometimes they have no intention of getting into a relationship, and whether that's right or wrong, I don't know.
It's not right or wrong, it's preferences. I guess it depends on who you're dating and whether they care or not. But it definitely begs the question, did Ingrid know that John didn't have a house or a car? And he could have probably been using her.
Exactly, but it's too early to tell if he was doing that, but it just kind of set off alarm bells. I think most women, not all women, care about a man at least having some stability. A lot of people want to make sure that when they're dating someone that can take care of themselves, has a job, especially women who have 3 children.
But we don't know what happened to John. We don't know why he doesn't have a house. We don't know if it's temporary, if it happened recently, so it's hard to tell. But when the detectives ask him if he has a mailing address or a P.O. box, this is when he starts to get concerned and wants to know why they want to know all this.
Yeah, it seems like John's a little bit confused, and Detective Stanglin tells him, well, we're just looking into what happened to Ingrid because, as you are aware, she is missing. So let's listen to what John has to say about Ingrid.
Online, there's no return for
online, like a dating site, or what kind of things did you guys like to do together?
Adult stuff, I guess you could say.
Did you notice he almost got bashful when the detective asked him what they like to do together? He's like, adult stuff, like sleeping together, like sex. Like, he's chuckling at the end. And maybe that's nervous laughter. It is personal. Not everyone wants to discuss their intimate relationships, especially with strangers in an interview room.
A gentleman never tells.
And neither does a lady.
Now, the detectives moved to the night of April 8th. They already know from Ingrid's computer and the CCTV footage that they went to the Mariners game, but they want to hear it from John.
Went to her house and went to the game. We started drinking a lot. We took the bus back. We went to her place again, and she dropped me off downtown. That's all I remember.
The best detectives are the ones, and the best lawyers are the ones who already know the answers to the questions they're asking. So they're just sitting there confirming, like, where did you go on Friday night? They already know. They have the CCTV footage. But I wanted to pause it there because already he was mentioning that they drank a lot. Maybe they pre-gamed. Maybe they had more drinks at the game as well as the bar. And detectives were trying to confirm where they went after the game. He says they went to a place called the Box House, where John's sister actually worked, and they stayed there for a few hours, and then they took a bus back to Ingrid's. Detectives tracked down the CCTV footage from the bus as well, and they see them get on together. So let's listen to John again.
So when you were at her place, what did you guys do there? Did you continue to drink?
Have sex.
And now he's okay saying the S word. They slept together when they got back to her place, according to him, and this all adds up. The detectives already know where they went after the game until, of course, they got on the bus. Now they know they were back at Ingrid's.
Which makes sense because her purse and phone were still there.
Right. But then John says that Ingrid left her house, dropped him back downtown. So that means she must have come back to her house after dropping him off because she wouldn't have left her phone and her purse behind while driving him. But he was a little fuzzy about being dropped off. Detective Stanglin was like, so you remember her dropping you off downtown? And he's like, well, I ended up downtown, so I'm pretty sure it was her that dropped me off.
You remember her dropping you off downtown?
Well, I ended up downtown, so I'm pretty sure it was her that dropped me off.
Okay. Where did you end up downtown?
When I woke up, sleeping outside of the building somewhere.
Were you like on the sidewalk?
Yeah. It's kind of what homeless people do sometimes.
Is it your impression that you went to sleep there like, I want to sleep here, or like, I'm drunk and I passed out?
Probably drunk and passed out.
Okay, so it seems like he was pretty wasted, and when you look at Ingrid and John getting on the bus together that night, you can see Ingrid kind of stumbling a bit, and she catches her balance on one of those seats before walking to the back of the bus.
Exactly. And this was before they got to Ingrid's. So it does look like both of them were drinking a decent amount. But I wonder how long they stayed at Ingrid's and if she sobered up before dropping him off downtown or what. Because he doesn't seem to remember anything. I mean, how much do you have to drink? How much does a grown man have to drink to not remember who dropped him off at the end of the night? And he passed out on the sidewalk and he just went to sleep.
And he wanted them to acknowledge, like, that's what happens to people without a home. They find themselves sleeping wherever they can. And I don't know why, but this kind of came off weird, almost arrogant.
Yeah, it was like he was cocky. I got that impression too. Almost like, don't you know what happens? Like, you have to sleep on the sidewalk. Almost like he was trying to school the detectives. Like, they're not aware what happens to people that don't have a house. But it also seems like he's getting agitated by all these questions.
Right, because he's acting like, I'm just the guy that met Ingrid online and we hung out.
Except he was the last known person to have been with her.
Right.
So it is very important for detectives to build a timeline of what happened. But he could have felt like they were judging him, like pointing the finger at him, and maybe that made him uncomfortable. But this is just part of the interview. So let's move to his last memory that he had of contact with Ingrid.
What's the last memory you have of contact with Ingrid? What's the last thing that you remember? Do you remember her driving you downtown?
I believe I sent her a message that morning. So she slept on it. Well, I knew she had her kids the next day, so that wasn't good. She didn't want me to meet her kids, ever. Or not ever, but she just didn't want me to meet her kids.
Do you know why? Is that something like for anybody she dates, or was it something about you?
Because I'm homeless.
So he recalled texting her the next morning to see if she slept well and knew that she'd be with her kids that day, and that's all he knows.
Yeah, and I don't know if at the end that was nervous laughter or if he was being judgmental. Like if it was like, I'm rolling my eyes kind of laughter. Like, well, I didn't meet the kids probably because I'm homeless, insinuating that Ingrid would have been judgmental and wouldn't think he was good enough to be introduced to her children. So that kind of caught me off guard, especially because on his profile, he says he doesn't have kids and doesn't even know if he wants kids. But now it seems like he's being shunned by Ingrid, like he's holding a chip on his shoulder because of it.
If it were me, I would imagine that he wouldn't have told anybody that he was homeless.
Right. Like, how do we know she even knew that?
Right. But for some reason, he doesn't even bother her the next day because she would be with her kids.
Maybe she told him that. Like, hey, when I'm with my kids, that's me time. And that could be looked at as respectful. It's her time with her girls. He just had time with her the night before. And this was really good information to understand the dynamic between John and Ingrid. So the detectives continue the interview. Now, we're not playing it in its entirety. It went on for a while, but we're picking out important parts to show you.
The detectives want to know more about John's routine, especially what the routine would look like whenever John and Ingrid hung out. So let's listen here.
So on times when you would leave Ingrid and you would like go to rent, and where would you stay?
What's about a missing person or about me?
So he got annoyed, and then he asked, are we talking about a missing person, or is this about me?
That seemed like a red flag to me. He was like not interested in them diving into any details about his life. But it's both.
Right.
Because you were the last person to see her, sir, and you were seen with her, drinking with her, saying that she dropped you off. So it's about him too. But he doesn't seem comfortable with them prying into his life. But the detectives are experienced. They're experienced with getting information out of people who don't want to give it to them. And Stanley lets him know that this is normal questioning to understand what a normal night would look like for this couple. However, John explains he's not normal. Yeah, let's listen.
So I think it would be kind of normal to have an idea of what the plans were for the night. What did you guys talk about?
It probably would have been normal, yes, but as you can see, I'm not on the streets.
So he's not normal because he doesn't have a home.
That's what I was gathering.
So when you were back in her place and you had sex, and I apologize for asking this, but was it in the bedroom or somewhere else?
I think we did.
And now he's like, I think we slept together. Now he's not sure.
Here we go.
So it seems like he is now backpedaling, which is never a good sign. It usually happens when someone's trying to create an alternative version of their story or trying to fill in gaps or confuse detectives. But it can also happen if someone genuinely doesn't remember something.
And you know what else isn't normal. One of the reasons he gives for not staying the night at Ingrid's.
Which one? I think I remember. And I don't want to laugh, but it was kind of funny to me, but also weird. But I don't know if he has a sarcastic personality.
Maybe, but he's like, who knows? Maybe I wanted to go get a candy bar or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the part I was thinking of. He's like, ugh. Was he trying to be funny?
I don't want to stay at Ingrid's because I want to get a candy bar.
He was like, I don't know why I didn't stay there. Maybe I was craving a candy bar. Let's just listen to it. But I don't know if he was trying to be funny, but why would you try to be funny in an interview about a missing person you were just with? Let's play it for you and you be the judge.
So was there a reason that you didn't spend the night that night?
I don't know. I was drunk. You know, maybe I wanted to go get a candy bar or something. I don't know.
It could have been nervousness, but it kind of also came off like, hey, lady, don't ask me. I don't know why I didn't spend the night there. Maybe it was my candy obsession. Like, he's making light of the situation.
What a strange thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when he was asked if anything stood out about the way Ingrid was acting, he did say that he thought she was acting weird. But when asked what he meant by that, he really didn't give any more details.
He also said that he didn't believe that she had any other plans after their date was over, but he couldn't be sure. I mean, she could be seeing someone else. She could be going with someone else afterwards, but he claimed that he failed to contact the police once he was aware of her disappearance because he had been concerned or offended by the text messages that he was receiving from her friends and family. But they were worried. They were scared. And that was the only number they had. And it was the last number she dialed.
Right. Wouldn't you want to help?
You would think so. But this is why the flags are kind of like escalating. But then again, we don't know his situation.
But then the detectives remind him that they found him at an address an hour and a half away in Lake Stevens and want to know whose address it was. It turned out that it was his ex-girlfriend's house.
See, I wonder if Ingrid knew that when he wasn't with her, he was staying with his ex, or he was really on the streets, because I got this weird vibe from his profile alone that was in a situationship. Remember, like, he's undecided. He doesn't want to commit because maybe he's still into his ex, for example.
He said it was complicated, but his dating profile said he didn't want complicated.
Right. He probably didn't want to further complicate things because maybe his ex kicked him out on the streets, or maybe she found out he was seeing other women or on a dating site. It's just getting more interesting as they're prying into his life.
Which would make sense why he didn't have a home. But that's not all that seems complicated to him. He also thinks that these questions are starting to become too complicated, and now he wants a lawyer because he's feeling the pressure.
Yes, and once you say the magic word, detectives have to stop the interview. So that is what they did. They leave to try to obtain counsel for him, and meanwhile, this man just decides to take a nap. I mean, if he truly was without a home and a bed, maybe you would take the opportunity for an air-conditioned room, but he just crawls up on the floor with his jacket as a pillow and falls asleep. And I have to admit, this part of this interview really reminded me of Jodi Arias. It just gave me those kind of vibes, like just making this place his home, making himself feel comfortable. But I do know a lot of people who are interviewed by police, they're getting tired. And they do kind of put their head down on the table. But I don't think I've ever seen someone flat out just make a bed on the floor like that.
It's also a very stressful situation. And according to the timestamps on the video, he'd been in there for a little over 2.5 hours.
Fair enough, but we've seen way longer interviews and people haven't taken naps. But then again, they haven't asked for attorneys either. They just keep going. And he did ask for an attorney.
So far, there's not much that he really provided. I do think he's an interesting character. He's calm, he's cooperative, but he's a little odd. But nothing stood out too concerning at this point, besides what we pointed out earlier.
I felt the same way, but let's pause on this part since investigators can't even go any further with John. It had been about a week since Mike, the guy who stumbled upon the first grisly discovery on the 21st Avenue in his recycling bin. And just as the city was hoping the worst was behind them, they found out that it wasn't. It was garbage pickup day once again, and a waste management worker was going about his routine. He was rolling blue recycling bins to the curb, lifting them up, and dumping the contents into his compactor, when one of the bins immediately felt way too heavy. He opened it up, and there was a cooler inside. He threw the cooler into the compactor, and they start to crush it, but the lid comes off. And the worker is able to look inside, and what he saw made his stomach drop. It was obvious. It was a human torso with a belly button ring still attached.
That detail really hit him. It was unmistakable, and the police were called immediately. Helicopters were flying overhead, crime scene vans lined the residential streets not too far from where the first set of remains were located, only about 2 blocks away, and they traced the bins back to its address, the home of Michael Mullen. But when they knocked, no one answered.
Is it weird that they're both named Michael?
It is. Michael wasn't home. He was at work, oblivious to what was going on until a panicked neighbor called him. And that neighbor said, "You need to get back here immediately. The cops are everywhere. Helicopters, it's serious. They found a body in your garbage can."
Can you imagine getting a phone call like that? You're at work, you're just having a normal day, the call comes in, and you have to rush back home because you're probably thinking, if you're not guilty, what in the world? Like, they're going to think I did something.
Of
Like,
course.
why would a cooler with a body be in my front yard? But you have to also remember that that call came in to Ingrid's family. And that was very disturbing because not only were they informed that more body parts were found, but they had to confirm that Ingrid indeed had her belly button pierced.
Michael, the owner of the house where the torso was found, raced home. He was thoroughly interviewed by police, and he had no connection to Ingrid. Someone had just used his bin to discard more remains. The entire neighborhood was in shock.
And now the reason why they were more in shock, I mean, they already were, but before it was an unknown person's remains that they were uncovering. But now the community was aware of who Ingrid was, that she was a mother, that she was a nurse, a fellow community member. And that made it so much harder. It became more personal. There were people who had donated to her GoFundMe. And then, they prayed at her vigil. And now this horror was unfolding on their street. And they just couldn't believe it was hitting so close to home. They were so sad that she could not rest in peace because she wasn't whole yet. Her parts were being scattered around the city and they were thrown away like trash. And a lot of people get mad when you say that, but essentially that is what was happening, and this nightmare was not over yet.
On April 18th, 9 days after Ingrid was reported missing, a call came into the police from the Republic Recycling Center about 20 minutes from Renton. A worker had been on the line sorting through the normal everyday recycling material when they came across something wedged into the machinery. Something they would never be able to unsee. Another missing piece of Ingrid. It was a left leg, and investigators immediately assumed it belonged to Ingrid Lyne, pairing with the right leg that had been found days earlier.
There's really no upside other than the fact that they were finding more of her. And I know the family probably wanted to bring all of her home to be laid to rest. And I couldn't help but think of Jennifer Dulos because Ingrid was a lot like her, a mother, discarded the same way with her remains scattered. But Jennifer's were never found, just parts of her bloodied clothing and other clues. And we did a deep dive on that case, but it is just really sad. But in this case, a lead does come in. Remember when they pulled the fingerprints from Ingrid's car? Well, guess what? They found a match. The prints on the driver's side door handle belonged to none other than John Robert Charlton. It wasn't direct evidence that he murdered Ingrid, but it was evidence that he drove her vehicle. I thought about the fact that you always open my door, though.
Yeah, always.
And I thought it's really not evidence that he drove her vehicle. Because just because you open someone's door, maybe he was opening the door for her. I'm just thinking like an attorney. I'm just thinking like just because someone has fingerprints around there.
Right. I suppose if you were to drive, I would open your door to the
Yeah, you
driver's seat.
would.
Yeah, of course.
But I think it was because he said that she dropped him off. So why would his fingerprints be on the door is what they were assuming. I'm just throwing it in there.
It was a clue that his story didn't exactly add up. He never told detectives that he drove Ingrid's car.
Right. Okay. So that's what I was thinking. They're just putting everything together and it's just another clue.
So detectives were carefully pulling apart John Charlton's stories, and they decided to dig deeper into his background, into his movements, into the people who knew him best. And first up was John's most recent girlfriend before he dated Ingrid. This was the one he vaguely referenced when talking to police, the one that he said was complicated. Detectives tracked her down. Her initials are TW, so we'll call her Tara for privacy. What she told police simply peeled away John's normal guy mask even more.
Well, John said himself that he wasn't normal, but according to Tara, John was supposed to come over her house the morning after the Mariners game, so Saturday, April 9th, to help with some yard work. They had planned this a week earlier, but that morning, John suddenly texted her out of nowhere and canceled. He told her that something came up. I have to postpone until later. Something came up is very vague, but It's enough to cover anything. But considering what detectives already suspected, it was another red flag. He was obviously busy with something.
They suspected he was busy depositing Ingrid's remains all over the town.
And I kind of wondered if who we're calling Tara, the ex-girlfriend, knew that he'd been sleeping on the streets, or that he was, sleeping at another girl's house, or if he even was homeless, or if he made that up. Because it seemed odd. If your girlfriend's like, hey, come over and help me with some yard work, but he has no home to go back to, unless he was using women for places to stay and rotating between them.
We'll get to more of that, but later that same day, John did eventually show up at Tara's house. And when he did, she noticed something immediately. He had a fat lip, a scratch on his forehead, a mark on his chin, scratches across his chest, left hand, and left forearm. When she asked what happened, John had a story to tell. He said the night before he got jumped coming out of a bar and some random guys stole his money.
Why didn't he mention that to police when he was in the interview? Because that would be very significant, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how his injuries, especially the scratches, they look more like defensive wounds than robbery bruises and scratches. And plus, now there was a discrepancy in his story. He told detectives that Ingrid dropped him off downtown, but he told Tara that he was left at the stadium. And this matters. Tiny lies matter. Tiny, seemingly insignificant timeline changes matter. He went back to Ingrid's, and that is where she was harmed. The evidence proved it.
That's exactly what detectives were thinking, so they called John back in. This time, they had probable cause to obtain a DNA sample, but they didn't really need to because his DNA was already on file, just like his fingerprints. He was already in the system because he was no stranger to run-ins with the law.
Of course he wasn't.
They dug deeper into his past and uncovered a criminal record that spanned 6 different states and over a decade. In 1997, convicted of a misdemeanor assault and guilty of marijuana possession. A year later, in 1998, a negligent driving charge in Washington. Then, in 2006, felony aggravated robbery in Utah. This was a second-degree felony.
And then in 2009, felony theft in Montana and misdemeanor battery. He was also arrested twice in Idaho for theft at a Target store in both May and in June. He would fill up his cart with electronics and he would just walk out with his cart full, and then he would resell them on eBay. And that summer in 2009, he stole about $200 from a grocery store, and all of this resulted in a 5-year Department of Corrections sentence. And by December 11th of 2014, that sentence was completed. He was a free man and back in Washington. And then 2 years later, he met Ingrid online.
Even John's own parents, Ray and Joanne Charlton, filed a restraining order against him back in 2006. Not because of teenage rebellion, not because of a stupid argument. They were scared of him. Terrified, actually. Court records revealed that John threatened his parents, refused to leave their home, provoked physical fights, refused to get a job, and was mentally unstable, especially when drunk.
At one point, in a moment that actually really terrified his mother and what led to them getting the restraining order, he allegedly slammed the movie Hannibal onto a coffee table in front of her and said, "You better beware." And now, I don't know anything about Hannibal, but if you do, you'd probably think that that is just creepy. But they thought it was a direct threat. That's what his mother truly believed. And what's sad is that on paper, John looked like he should have had every advantage. His parents invested heavily in their children's futures, private schooling, high expectations, carefully mapped out career dreams for both John and his sister Shannon. But somewhere along the way, something just fell out of place.
We can only make assumptions, but what's been reported is that it could have been rebellion from the rigid structure of the home where questioning authority wasn't encouraged. Maybe it was John's natural defiance, that stubborn edge that didn't bend under pressure. Or maybe there was always something lurking darker inside of him.
Well, it's always the question of nurture versus nature, and some people truly are born with a propensity for evil, more than others at least.
Well, whatever it was, by the time he hit his teenage years, John was already spiraling, dabbling in drugs. The kid with all the potential turned into an adult with repressed rage, chasing instant gratification instead of the life his parents envisioned.
Yes, and that is when the spiral began in 1997. As we said, the marijuana possession. But one of the most telling early incidents happened on June 24th of 2006 in Lyne, Mississippi. A woman was sitting in her parked car. She was cradling a baby and waiting for her husband outside of a bookstore, and out of nowhere, John approached her car, demanded that she got out, threatened her, jumped in, and drove off. And luckily, the police were nearby and they quickly pursued him. And John fled onto the interstate, trying to outrun law enforcement all the way to Georgia. And then he ditched the car at a convenience store, but was quickly arrested and charged with aggravated theft. Now, he was sentenced to 1 to 15 years behind bars, but thanks to a legal loophole, he had early release and he just served 21 months. Not enough time to fix anything, but enough time to sharpen his bad habits.
And by June 24th of 2008, John was out again, and it didn't take long before the cycle repeated itself again and again.
But one thing about John Charlton is he didn't fit the stereotype that most people have in their heads about a criminal. Women find him to be charming and handsome and seductive even, according to multiple ex-girlfriends who later gave statements to police. And we'll get there. Don't worry, there's more to learn. But John figured out early that his looks were a weapon, a disarming one. He could smile, he could make small talk, he would flirt just enough to slip past a woman's defenses.
And for someone like Ingrid Lyne, someone hopeful, someone trusting, it might have been just enough for John to gain her trust. John was clearly not stable. Who knows what could have set him off, but with detectives knowing substances were a part of John's past, they suspected it could have played a part.
Or even just alcohol, because his parents said that when he drank, he became violent.
Well, they also said he used to do crack.
Okay, well, that changes things even more.
Yeah, his parents said that he would also hold grudges for years, and when he was under the influence, he would expose his frustrations.
I feel like that's putting it lightly, and not to mention his parents actually withdrew the restraining order at a later date, and I guess parents try to see the best in their children.
Within hours of this evidence falling into place, John Charlton, the man who claimed to be looking for just a friend on dating apps, was no longer just a person of interest. He was the prime suspect in the murder of Ingrid Lyne. When he was brought back into the station, they took photos of him and they saw all those injuries his ex talked about.
He had injuries on his forehead. They looked like scratch marks. He also had a mark on his chin. He even had a few scratches on his chest, another scratch on the top of his left hand, another on his left forearm. Definitely looked like they were from fingernails. Everything they had at this point was enough to arrest John for second-degree murder, as they gathered more information and evidence like GPS from his phone, if it pinged at any of the locations where the bins were located, for example, and his bail was set at $2 million.
And detectives kept digging. Even before his prison stints, John's life was unstable. He bounced from job to job, rarely sticking around long enough to build anything real. And it was at one of these forgettable jobs that he met a woman named Heather. They had a brief relationship, only about 6 months, and she came forward after his arrest.
I'm thinking because he jumped around a lot and couldn't commit to things, maybe he didn't have any relationships that were more than 2 years.
Right.
But she was scrolling, and that is when she saw the headline, Seattle Man Arrested in Dismemberment of Nurse Ingrid Lyne. And then she saw John's name, which isn't that common. I mean, John is, but Charlton, that's not. And then, of course, there was his mugshot. It was unmistakable. It was those eyes, those wild, almost see-through crystal green eyes that had once stared right through her, and Heather froze. First came the shock, and then the sickness, and then something even heavier because she thought to herself, I'm not surprised. Because Heather already knew something was really off about John.
They met at work, co-workers at first, and then friendly conversations that became casual hangouts. And those casual hangouts became something more. At first, John was everything women are taught to dream about. Charming, smart, good looking.
Also the classic recipe for overlooking the flags, I might add. And just like Ingrid, Heather was also a single mom at that time. Life was stressful, overwhelming, and lonely sometimes. And John, he was attentive. He listened. He showed up. And when Heather's daughter was hospitalized, John didn't even hesitate. He brought her food when she was starving from sitting at her daughter's bedside all day. And he even gifted them a teddy bear, one that probably felt like a selfless act and a heavy moment.
Eventually, John earned Heather's trust and he moved in with her and her daughter.
But do you notice a pattern? Why not get his own place? Why not save for a place that they could get together? Why move in with this woman? And it's like he slowly creeps into these women's lives and just leeches off of them.
I actually know a guy who practices this type of behavior. I've never known him to have his own place. He always shacks up with the new girl he meets. He gives him a ring, says, "You're my fiance," and dangles that carrot. Never ever pulls the trigger. When they break up with him, he's on to the next one.
There are serial daters, like people who do that kind of stuff, and they never have any intention of committing fully, but they're just using someone for whatever they can have in that moment. And then the woman's always like, gosh, within 6 months he left me and he was like married to somebody else. And it's just because that person could offer more. It's really sad.
Living together exposed what dating was hiding. Heather started noticing nothing was ever good enough for John. He lectured her constantly, nitpicking every detail of their home life. He saw the world in black and white. It was his way or the wrong way.
And honestly, of course, we know a lot more details than we're providing here, but it sounded so much like OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Now, this is not OCD. This is not just wanting something clean. It goes beyond that. It's needing everything done exactly their way. There's no flexibility and no empathy. You should look it up. It's really interesting. It's kind of like narcissism, but different. Personality disorders are very interesting to me. And it also is interesting that this isn't even his house. He comes in and then he's telling her, oh, I don't like this. It all has to be my way.
And then there was the drinking. When John drank, Heather said he changed. He became mean, cruel, like a completely different person, but wearing his face. Still no hitting, no obvious violence until one night.
Heather said it happened during intimacy after they had been drinking a lot. Suddenly, John became violent. He was aggressive in ways that really scared her. It made it hard for her to breathe, and it made her realize how small she was compared to him. She chalked it up to a drunken mistake, something that he wouldn't repeat. I mean, he had his hands around her neck, but he did repeat it.
That's when she knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a preference. It was who he really was, and Heather ended that relationship immediately.
But even before this, she said there was something about his eyes. And she even told him, she was like, there's something really weird and off about your eyes. And he's like, don't say that. But I agree. I mean, there is something weird about his eyes that are really creepy to me, but that's me looking back and knowing everything we know now. But he does just seem kind of off. And she trusted her gut. And she got out. And she never looked back until she saw his name in the news. She made her rounds on TV, even interviewing with Dr. Phil. And she told him that even though John never left visible bruises, he left scars that she couldn't explain to anyone, not even her mother, who she usually confided in. And now, knowing what John had done to Ingrid, Heather said, it made my skin crawl. I wish I would have said something to someone. John Charlton was a predator hiding in plain sight.
His exes weren't the only ones coming forward. When John Charlton's face started appearing on the news, some people who knew him recognized the face, but couldn't reconcile it with the headlines. Former roommates, old landlords, casual friends, they all said basically the same thing. He was quiet, hardworking, and normal. To them, John was just another guy hustling through life. A little introverted maybe, a little private, but nothing about him screamed danger.
Maybe it's easier to hide darkness like this from men, like a man hiding it from another man, especially if you're not the one he's trying to control. I think he may look completely different when he is in the presence of a woman. But one male friend digging a little deeper into his memory said something that cracked the normal facade wide open. He said that John was a totally different person when he was under the influence, and John wasn't exactly shy about it. In his own words, in his interview with those detectives, John admitted that he used street drugs, and then he wouldn't say which ones they were, but let's be honest, it's not a good sign. If you won't say it out loud, it's probably not something you're proud of. It's probably pretty serious, and his parents already said crack. He even acknowledged having a huge alcohol problem, that he didn't just drink casually, he drank excessively all the time.
And when you step back and think about the logistics of what happened to Ingrid Lyne, the force required, the determination it would take, the brutal time investment, to take someone apart and then to clean up the entire scene afterward, to load bags into a car and then dump them systematically across the city, to me, it sounded methodical.
Yes, investigators knew this was not a chaotic impulse. It was methodical. Whatever John Charlton lacked in career ambition or life stability, he made up for in sheer terrifying willpower that night. He called himself ambitious in his dating profile, but where he chose to focus that energy and persistence wasn't towards building a life for himself. It was towards destroying one. And every person who ever said he seemed normal would now have to live with this uneasy truth that sometimes monsters don't look like monsters until it's too late.
And the evidence was still pouring in, as John Charlton sat behind bars waiting to be officially charged. And then tried in court, more women from his past began stepping out of the shadows. One of them, another former girlfriend with the initials JM, and let's call her Jamie. She came forward with something even darker. She said that one night, long before Ingrid Lyne's case ever made the news, John had confided in her. According to Jamie, John admitted that when he lived in Florida, he had killed someone. Not an accident, not a bar fight gone wrong. He said he hit the man over the head with a frying pan, dragged his body into a bathtub, cut him up, and threw the body into water.
I'm sorry, but what? He's just telling somebody this? He's telling an ex-girlfriend? And he told this story years ago. When she came forward, details about Ingrid's case hadn't even been made public. No one knew anything about a bathtub.
Right, it was way too specific to ignore, so of course detectives had to check. They dug through Florida homicide records, they looked for missing persons reports, unsolved murders, suspicious disappearances, anything that matched John's creepy late-night confession.
And?
Nothing. No record of a murder fitting that description, no victim, no missing body.
Well, not that they could find, yet.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it never happened. I mean, maybe it was a lie. Maybe John just made it up. It was like a sick fantasy that he wanted to dangle in front of her to see how she would react.
Or maybe it was just never discovered.
Either way, who casually tells a story about killing someone? Who boasts about cutting up a body and dumping them in the water like it's a pickup line?
Whether it happened or not, the fact is that John Charlton thought about it, talked about it, lived inside that fantasy long enough to describe it. That says everything you need to know about who he really was.
By June 23rd of 2016, Phil Lyne, which was Ingrid's ex-husband, wrote an update on their GoFundMe account, and he said, quote, "Thank you for all of your support. Thank you so much to all of you for your donations. We are truly grateful for the outpouring of love and support for Reese, Brooke, and Noelle. We have, through our attorneys, set up what we believe is an amazing trust for the girls. That is where the money from the GoFundMe effort will go. Please know that we do not take your donations lightly. Also know that the money you so generously gave will go to the girls and only the girls in a way that we see healthy and stewardly. While Reese, Brooke, and Noelle obviously struggle with the loss of their mother, they continue to amaze us with their resiliency and grace. Yes, there are tears and incredibly difficult moments, but there are also moments of reflection and smiles, even laughs, about the wonderful memories that they have of their beloved mother. Again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. We will never forget your love and generosity. With love, the family of Ingrid Marie Lyne."
Meanwhile, with new evidence coming in, John's charges were upgraded to first-degree murder, and his trial was set for October 2nd of 2017. And in the end, John Charlton didn't make the Lyne family suffer through a long trial. Instead, right before the jury selection, he pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of Ingrid Lyne.
And he didn't do this out of remorse. It was more like a cornered prey who knew that he wasn't going to win.
Still, before that guilty plea was entered, John's defense attorney Gordon Hill tried to argue something baffling. He said, "There is no forensic evidence linking John to any crime."
Really? Between the blood, the fingerprints, the scratches, the saw, the mashing trash bags, and the CCTV footage, and the shoddy alibi, what exactly do you call that?
Not a coincidence, and John admitted to all of it.
But I mean, I guess it wasn't forensic. Well, no, it was forensic. That shit is forensic.
If we were in the jury, I wonder what all the evidence is, but based off of what we know thus far, I mean, he's kind of got a point.
I'm not saying he doesn't have a point. I understand he's just doing his job. And, we're not really hearing about the science of everything. We know the fingerprints existed, but I even said, could have been someone else that, he could have just opened the car door.
And Ingrid is still missing an arm that could have been the arm that scratched him.
That is true. I do realize that. But I think all of this together, it's definitely not a coincidence.
Right.
And John admitted to it.
The murder, dismemberment, and disposal, all of it.
Mm-hmm. But wait, because it's not over yet. The court moved to the sentencing hearing. The state put forth in detail what John had done.
Mr. Charlton intentionally and with premeditation strangled Ingrid to death. He placed her body in a bathtub. Using a pruning saw, he dismembered her body severing her limbs and head from her torso.
And then it was time for the victim impact statements. We're not going to play them in their entirety, but it was very emotional. Ingrid's ex-husband, the father of her children, spoke about how her loss has affected all of them, how he had to tell their girls that mommy had been hurt so badly that she was never coming back.
There was me telling them that mommy had died this weekend and someone had hurt her so badly that she had died. Then came the screaming and crying. Our daughters continue to thrive, but miss their mother every day in different ways.
Next, one of Ingrid's closest friends, Nancy, got up to speak. She talked about the hole Ingrid's murder had torn through everyone who loved her, the birthdays missed, the graduation she'd never get to see, and then directly to John, calling him a coward.
You smothered her laugh, you crushed her smile, and you left us with the nightmare of the unimaginable. Cowardly, you ran and hid, and when caught, you claimed you did not remember. Nobody believes that story.
Then John's attorney spoke, and I know it is her job, but I'm always thinking, how can someone defend someone like this monster? She wanted the court to look at the fact that he came forward as part of mitigation. Like, you shouldn't give him a long sentence because he took a plea deal, he pleaded guilty, he didn't make the family suffer through the trial. So let's listen to that.
But he does hope that his decision to plead guilty as charged, his decision to actually make a statement as to what happened, that it answers questions for people.
And then, to everyone's surprise,
and probably disgust,
that too, John spoke. I don't know if this was an act or not, but let's play it.
Do you agree that there are no words that can... There's no words that can alleviate the pain that I've caused? And for that, I'm truly sorry.
Right. There are no words. No words. Like, you should have just saved it. Like, don't act like you're choked up. You choked a mother, a nurse, someone who saved lives, who gave life to other human beings, and he took one. It's sick. And his attorney was like, it's okay, take your time. I don't know if you saw that. Let's play that part again real fast in slow motion. Again, I know it is her job, but now he wants sympathy. And I don't buy it. I don't think he was sorry. I just think he's sorry that he got caught. Now, this was supposed to be the part where justice was done, but there's a catch. Under Washington state law, because John used his hands to kill Ingrid, not a gun, not a knife, not a deadly weapon by legal definition, the maximum sentence they could give him was 333 months. That's 27 years and 9 months. Not life, not without parole.
The judge tried to have compassion for Ingrid's family, but she explained the law and that she was giving the maximum. If it was up to her, she would sentence him to life in prison, but she doesn't have that power.
Today is the close of a tragic end to a great life lived and ended far too soon.
But the thing is, when you think about what he did to Ingrid, the brutality and the reality of it all, it just feels really unfair. When we opened the story, we talked about hope. The kind of hope that made a little boy in Sleepless in Seattle call a radio station on Christmas Eve, praying for his dad to find love again. It's the kind of hope that makes people pick up the classifieds in the 90s, dial strangers willing to take a chance on finding someone. It wasn't just for us to be nostalgic that we brought all of that up. It's because it captures something so universal. It's this desperate human hope that somewhere out there, someone might get us. It's the kind of hope that leads millions of people today to swipe right, looking for a spark, a connection, maybe even a forever type of love. And Ingrid Lyne had that hope.
She believed that even after heartbreak, after a painful divorce, there was still something waiting for her out there. She believed in second chances, but she will never get that chance to find it.
And that's because sometimes monsters don't always show up in horror masks. Sometimes they show up with flannel shirts and soft smiles, with dating profiles that say, I'm just looking for friends. For anyone listening who's scared now, who wonders if it's still safe to hope, it is. Because hope isn't the problem. Hope isn't the enemy. We bring to light the evil in this world, but it's not common. Evil's rare. You're not naive. You're not foolish if you still believe in finding true love. But just be on high alert. Don't trust someone on looks alone or smooth talk.
And it seems so simple to say this, but listen to your instincts, set your boundaries, ask questions, and do background checks. It might cost a fee, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than paying with your own life.
I know, and we're not trying to be like making light of any of this. It does sound simple, but it should be a non-negotiable. It's a must. It's your first line of defense so that you can be aware, because we don't know what resources were available in 2016. Things have changed dramatically since then. And this is in no way a blame game to say that Ingrid did anything wrong, even if she did overlook things. This was all John Charlton's fault. He was broken. Ingrid didn't do anything wrong, but hoped to find someone to connect with. And I have to say sorry to her family, especially her daughters. I did see them while I was researching, and they look exactly like their mother. And they seem that they're doing really well despite these really terrible circumstances. They're part of Ingrid, the part that still lives on, and I truly hope that they can find peace. Thank you all so very much for being here for Ingrid's story. We will see you in our next video. Bye.